Have you ever felt a pull towards something bigger than yourself? A calling that you just couldn't ignore? For me, that calling echoed in the crisp morning air of my small hometown, in the stories my grandfather told, and in the flag that flew proudly in our front yard. This is my story, the story of how a regular kid decided to answer the call to serve. Growing up, life was simple. It was all about Friday night football games, summer jobs, and dreaming about the future. My dreams were pretty typical. Maybe college, a good job, a family. But there was always this undercurrent, this quiet whisper of a different path. It started with my grandfather. He was a veteran, a man of few words but immense character. He never boasted about his time in the service, but when he did speak, his eyes held a depth of experience that I couldn't quite comprehend. He'd talk about camaraderie, about depending on the person next to you with your life, and about a sense of purpose that he said you couldn't find anywhere else. Those conversations planted a seed. As I got older, that seed started to sprout. In history class, I wasn't just learning about dates and battles. I was seeing the faces of those who stood on the front lines, who made sacrifices for the freedoms I often took for granted. I started reading books, watching documentaries, and talking to recruiters. It wasn't about the action or the glory I saw in movies. It was about challenging myself, pushing my limits, and becoming part of a legacy of service that stretched back through generations. The more I learned, the more the idea of putting on that uniform felt less like a choice and more like a destiny. Of course, not everyone understood. My parents were worried. "It's dangerous," my mom would say, her voice tight with concern. "Are you sure this is what you want?" My friends thought I was crazy. "You're giving up your freedom," they'd argue. "Why would you want someone yelling at you all day?" And I'll admit, their words made me pause. I had my own fears too. Fear of the unknown, fear of failure, fear of not being strong enough, both physically and mentally. The night before I went to the recruitment office, I barely slept. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with 1,000 what-ifs. But then I remembered my grandfather's words, that quiet strength in his eyes. I thought about the sense of belonging, of being part of something that truly mattered. This wasn't about giving up my freedom. It was about protecting the freedom of others. It was about finding my own strength, not in spite of the challenges, but because of them. So, the next morning, I walked into that recruiter's office. My heart was pounding, but for the first time, my path felt clear. It was a mix of terror and excitement. I was stepping off the predictable road and onto a trail that was rugged, uncertain, but filled with purpose. Signing those papers was one of the most surreal moments of my life. With each signature, I felt like I was closing one chapter and opening another, much larger one. It was a commitment, a promise not just to my country, but to myself. A promise to become the best version of myself, to learn discipline, honor, and courage in a way I never could have in civilian life. Leaving home was tough. Saying goodbye to my family and friends, to everything familiar, was one of the hardest things I've ever done. There were tears, tight hugs, and promises to write. As the bus pulled away, I watched my hometown shrink in the rearview mirror, and I knew life would never be the same. Basic training was a shock to the system, to put it mildly. It was a world away from anything I'd ever known. The early mornings, the relentless physical exertion, the constant pressure, it was designed to break you down and build you back up, and it worked. There were days I thought I couldn't take another step, couldn't do one more push-up, couldn't listen to one more command. But then I'd look at the person next to me, struggling just as much as I was, and we'd share a look, a silent bond of shared hardship. And in that moment, you find a little more strength. It's a strange thing, this transformation. You arrive as an individual, and you slowly, painstakingly become part of a team. Your successes are their successes, and their struggles are yours. You learn to rely on each other in a way that's hard to explain. You're forged together in the fires of exhaustion and determination. The yelling, the discipline, it all started to make sense. It wasn't just about following orders, it was about building trust, about creating an unbreakable unit that could function under the most extreme pressure imaginable. You learn that your individual comfort is secondary to the mission and the well-being of your team. Looking back, that initial decision, that single step into the recruiter's office, set in motion a journey that has defined my life. It wasn't an easy path, and it wasn't for everyone, but it was my path. It was the answer to a call I felt deep in my soul. It taught me the true meaning of commitment, sacrifice, and brotherhood. It showed me that true strength isn't just about how much you can lift or how fast you can run. It's about your mental fortitude, your integrity, and your willingness to stand for something you believe in. My time in the service started with a simple call, a whisper of purpose that I chose to answer. And I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If this resonated with you, or if you have your own story of answering a call, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories about service, purpose, and finding your path. We'll see you in the next one.